When I was growing up, I felt like I had these two different ideas of what Jewish food, Eastern European Jewish food was. Right? I had the matzo ball soup, but I had the food of my home, of my grandmother, of the food. When I would walk in and smell chicken soup, and I knew matzo balls were on the stove, I knew it was Passover. I knew it was a holiday. It was the foods of nostalgia, of memory. I can always tell you about my grandmother's apple strudel, or my grandmother's brisket. My mother wasn't a great cook, but my grandmother's everything was phenomenal. And that was really what placed me. When I went off to college and I traveled, if I smelled those foods, it kind of brought me back to sort of where I was from, who I was. And it's really beautiful, beautiful tradition. Of course, the deli. Anyone know where this was shot? The sandwich? Second Avenue Deli. It's a trick, right? Because usually they're not as big at the Second Avenue Deli, but this is the double-decker corned beef sandwich. So my father, I grew up in New Jersey. My father, though, was a kid from Brooklyn. I went to Solomon Schechter in West Orange, now Golda Up, but part of my Jewish training, I guess, he took me to Brooklyn and he made sure I went to Mrs. Stahl's Knishes to taste the best knishes in New York, which are no longer around. He made sure I went to Ratner's to eat at the dairy restaurant that was known for the blintzes and the onion rolls and the baked herring, and he took me to the delis. The deli for him was the essence of what Judaism was. He was a schmoozer at synagogue. He would stand outside, he would just hang out and talk. But when he was in a deli, I promise you, he would look and decide what he was going to order. He would stare at this menu. He would sit patiently, not that patiently, but he would be so excited about what was going to come, and that was his synagogue. And of course, the deli is known as the secular synagogue, and it really aptly was his synagogue. And for me, when I was younger, I'd walk by a deli and not go in. I felt guilt. I felt ashamed. Who was I not to go in there? And I'm so blessed to be in the New York, New Jersey area. We grew up with Zeta's that was nearby in South Orange, where we'd get all of our things and all of our Jewish prepared goods for the holidays. And that was this other, really incredible part of my Jewish tradition. There was this other side. This is the kosher aisle, actually, in the ShopRite Livingston.
I was in the ShopRite.
Yeah.
That's the Mecca.
It's like one.
It's a pretty crazy kosher aisle. But something that I realized, I met non-Jews. Believe it or not, I went to Schechter and I met non-Jews, and they all thought that Jewish food was this. And actually, interestingly enough, I would meet a lot of Jews, especially when I left the Schechter world. I went off to college. They thought that latkes come in a box, that matzo balls come in a box, that Jewish soups are usually, they come in plastic tubes with a little season packet. What else do we have? I'm not even going to yet touch on the jars of gefilte fish, but they thought that Jewish food came packaged and processed. And in packaging that didn't reflect any of our modern values or aesthetic senses, and that was what Jewish food was. It is for many people, or at least this Eastern European Jewish food, as compared to the much sexier Israeli food of today, right? So this is what Ashkenazi food was, and Israeli food is the vibrant, alive falafel and salad, and that's sort of embarrassing. In fact, I find it incredibly embarrassing to find that one of the foods that I do a lot of work around, gefilte fish, people will just laugh at, they make fun of, called sausage of the sea. And anyone know what this is? No. Cholent. Yeah, so cholent. Anyone want to define cholent for me?
Something that's been cooked. No, it's something that's been cooked for 24 hours. You put it on before Shabbat. You eat it at the end, and it's usually got some sort of dried beans. It sometimes has meat and sometimes doesn't, depending on who you are. It often has carrots, but not always. It can be sweet, but not doesn't have to be.
Yeah. Fantastic. So, yeah. It's a slow cooked Sabbath stew is one of my shorthand ways of saying it. But cholent, it's one of the things that always stands out for me. People think of Jewish food as a blech, or however you pronounce it. It's just sort of something that gives off very low heat, but enough that you can keep things warm. You can put it over a burner. Sometimes they have ones that you plug in, and this way you can like serve things warm on Shabbat for the meals if you are observant. But cholent is one of those foods that's brown and heavy. And I find that most people associate Ashkenazi Jewish food as that, as brown and heavy foods. 50 shades of brown, as I've heard it before. And again, and I actually really love cholent. I didn't grow up religious. I grew up in the conservative movement, but we didn't really do Shabbat that kind of way. So I didn't start experiencing cholent until I went to college and met more Orthodox folks and went to their homes and had it. And I loved it, but it doesn't really look exciting. And if anything, it reflects that same idea that, oh, this is only a heavy winter food. So, it was about 6 years ago, after I had, for those who weren't there at the pickle workshop, I'll touch on it later, but I spent time on a Jewish pickle farm up in the Berkshires, and I learned to make pickles, and I moved to New York, and I ended up doing some work with the farmers markets in New York, and I eventually started importing olive oil and other products from Israel, and around that time, a friend of mine wrote a book called Save the Deli, which was about really the death of the Jewish deli. Delis closing around the country. And I remember when the Second Avenue closed, which was really a shocking moment for me. I literally cried when I heard the report on the radio. And there was a moment, probably about 2009, 2010, where it felt like, oh my gosh, this cuisine might not be around. Like this, what's going to happen? And I felt activated. I felt like, oh my gosh, if I don't do something now, this may not be here. And another moment for me was when Zeta's closed. Because Zeta's is where my family always got gefilte fish. And one year, there was no gefilte fish to get. And my grandmother stopped making it. We weren't jarred gefilte fish people in my house. And so one year we went to Staten Island to get it, but that was crazy, and the traffic and the tolls. My father was like, I want to do it again. And I think that year I said, I'll make it. And so this sort of put into motion for me what was a beginning of a project to sort of reclaim and reimagine what this food could be, but to also understand it on a deeper level. So this is a photo from Smorgasburg. Anyone heard of that in Brooklyn? It's basically the Williamsburg. It started in Williamsburg, hence the name Smorgasburg. And it brought together vendors and restaurants and cooks and chefs to sort of bring a tent out, and people come and they can just buy whatever they want and sit around. And in 2010, 2011, when it first started, it was a laboratory. All these young chefs were coming out of the woodwork and saying, I want to cook my family's food. And there were Italian chefs who had just gone to Italy and came back, and they were so inspired by some of the old world techniques, and they were coming to this place. Ethiopian chefs were doing it and making these Ethiopian dishes I'd never even heard of, and they were just embracing it. I always like to say, I think every culture, everyone was sort of cooking their own stinky foods that they were once ashamed of. All these young Korean picklers were making kimchi and selling it. There were 4 or 5 kimchi makers that just emerged and sprouted up. And one thing I didn't see was anyone doing Jewish food. There were Israeli places, but there was no Ashkenazi food. And again, I said, oh my gosh, like the delis are closing and nothing is happening. And so I ended up meeting my business partner at Lazalpern, and we decided, you know what, maybe we should create our own. And so that's what we did. This is our first booth at a pop-up market in Soho, and we created we called it Gifilteria. We sort of anchored ourselves around gefilte fish because of my experiences. It was one of the first foods that I cooked because it was disappearing. And we also felt like it was the food most in need of a makeover, an Ashkenazi culinary canon. And we also served pickles and some other foods, and we took them to these really hip markets, and we tried to, just bring some color and excitement to make the case that, these foods have some relevance. And we were amazed at people's reaction, the response to us. People were really excited. Plenty of people walked by and laughed and, snubbed their nose, but people were also curious, and also non-Jews. A lot of people came up to us and said, gefilte fish, what's that? And they were just so open to it. They wanted to try it. Most Jews walked by it and said, gefilte fish, no way, and they just walked away. So that was a really interesting experience for us, and we were heartened by that, and we started making gefilte fish and actually distributing it around the holidays. From there, because of the reaction, because of that conversation, we began, and we actually wrote a manifesto when we first started, just a 4-paragraph mission statement, reclaiming these foods and making sure they don't die, and making sure they're not just wrapped up in kitsch. They're not just about our grandmothers or our bubbies, that it has to be more than just nostalgia. We need to move this cuisine forward. So we kind of wrote that statement. And pretty soon thereafter, we started making gefilte fish that we would sell in stores. And this is the gefilte fish that some of you had today. And we developed packaging, and we really created a product that we wanted to be a little bit different. We wanted it to, still be gefilte fish. When we first got started, we said, oh my gosh, let's make sriracha gefilte fish and curry gefilte fish. Let's go crazy and make it new. And we were eating it, and we were saying, wait, we want the original. We want good quality gefilte fish made with high quality ingredients. And so that's what we decided to do. We put kind of our own Brooklyn spin. And so we started baking our gefilte fish instead of poaching it. And we added color. We took that limp, usually pallid orange carrot, and we made it into a relish, and it just kind of started to pop. We added the beet horseradish. We made a stripe of steelhead trout and salmon. We focused on sustainably sourced ingredients. We made it gluten-free. We're making it for Passover. Most of the gefilte fish you buy for Passover is made with cottonseed oil, which is not actually food, but it happens to be kosher for Passover. So we first started with grapeseed oil, then we moved to a light olive oil. We wanted it to reflect our modern values, and yet we wanted it
in the refrigerator section.
So we first started refrigerated and distributing it. But one thing we quickly learned was that stores will not basically take on the risk of a fresh product. And so we had to quickly learn that, well, we would have to blast freeze ours. We did a high quality freeze, and we started doing we do a fully cooked gefilte fish. So you just have to let it thaw. You don't have to cook it yourself like some of the other ones. But that's something that was a reality in the market, and we learned a lot of things.
That works for me.
Yeah.
Do you sell it here?
It's not. There are stores that ship it and deliver it around New Jersey, but no stores in New Jersey carry it.
Why not?
It's hard to get the fish across this one.
Well, ask me later. We'll talk about it. But I got some thoughts. But after that, we quickly started getting to there was an enthusiasm around Ashkenazi food. Not just us. A few young delis also happened to have opened around the time that we were starting this, and people reached out, and we started catering dinners, and it became an opportunity for me to start doing research and digging deep and understanding some of these food traditions and sort of where they came from. And every dinner became a research opportunity. This is one dinner I did in 2014. There was a summer. It was meant to be a summer Ashkenazi celebration, and there's actually a latke encrusted red snapper that's on the table there. But we were in the backyard of, believe it or not, for those who know, who's been to Ratner's? Okay, so the old dairy restaurant. So the grandson of the Ratner's family opened a restaurant in Brooklyn, and this was in his backyard. And we had connected because of that Ratner's connection. But we, there's a soup you can see there, which is a sorrel soup, a shav. For those who know, some people call it green borscht. And we were really thinking about if I was in Ukraine or Poland in the summertime, what would I want to be eating? And so and there were all sorts of pickled items as well, of course. This is actually back to Ratner's, that dairy restaurant, the restaurant that specializes in non-meat foods, but just borscht and bialys and onion rolls and things like that. This is in San Diego. This is 2 years ago. This is we called it Delancey Street West. This is our Ratner's inspired meal, 140-person Shabbat dinner that I was part of basically putting on this Jewish ranch outside of San Diego. And we really tried to bring as much of the authentic restaurant experience as we could. Ratner's was known for its red aprons, white shirts, little bow ties, black bow ties, really surly waiters. It was known for waiters who just didn't really care what you wanted, and they were going to treat you, as disrespectfully as they could. And we tried to convey to the waiters in California, it's not whatever the customer wants. You need to be rude. You need to walk away, and they just couldn't do it. They were too California. But Randers was also known for people putting the onion rolls in their bag because they took them home. And at this meal, even there were some young people, but there were some older folks as well from New York. They actually called New York the old country out in San Diego. And there were some people who we made bialys on a pizza oven in the field, and they were putting them into their bags. And for me, that was honestly like the ultimate feeling of like, we made it, we did it, success.
That's hysterical.
But so each one of these opportunities, and it's been about 5.5 years since we started the Gifilteria, was an opportunity to really kind of get to understand the different perspectives on this food tradition. So not beyond just the deli or beyond just my grandmother's cooking. And because of that, we decided that we wanted to write a book, my business partner and I. And in doing that, we wanted to think about what is the essence? What does every Ashkenazi dish sort of have? And how can we understand what this cuisine actually has to offer? And we really believed it did have something to offer. Every cuisine in the world, reflects a culinary wisdom. It reflects a different kind of perspective on a place. And we felt Ashkenazi food has an incredible story to tell, and we wanted to tell it. And so I'm going to share some of those core principles that I felt like I discovered with some of you. And the photos are going to be photos from the cookbook. So for those who were here for the pickles, we talked about the probiotic sour dill pickle. For me, everything starts with the pickle. I don't need to tell you how in love I am with Jewish pickles, but when I was on that pickle farm, which was, for those who weren't here, the Berkshires, there's a place called the Isabella Friedman Center, and they have an organic Jewish farm. The tagline of the farm is "Young Jewish Farmers Changing the World One Pickle at a Time." And I arrived on the farm the year before, a year after they had a bumper crop of cucumbers, and no one really knew what to do with these cucumbers. And they made cucumber salads. They were making, cucumber-infused water, and they were just basically wasting these until someone said, "I have a recipe. Let's make pickles." And they made this saltwater sour pickle, not the Vlasic or Clausen, like yellowy pickles that you find, that are, shelf stable. They made these pickles that just were just really intensely flavorful. They were fresh. They were incredible. I experienced it the next year when afterwards they decided, hey, let's make pickles intentionally. Let's grow these cucumbers and let's make this a business. And so I was there part of building that business. I was actually one of the first team members to pack 50-gallon barrels of pickles. But the thing that really suddenly opened up a whole new way of thinking about this food tradition was thinking about the Jewish deli. There was a pickle beside a pastrami sandwich. For those who are here for the pickling workshop, you know that's going to help you digest that heavy, fatty pastrami sandwich. And in fact, you start to look through Jewish food and the history and realize, oh, meat was really expensive. People were actually eating a lot more of the pickles than they were the meat. Everyone talks about Jewish food being so heavy, but imagine if that deli sandwich were really small and you only ate it once a year because it was really special. And if we're talking about pastrami, it would have been made of goose, not beef. And only Romanian Jews would have known about it. And it would have been not on bread as a sandwich, because that didn't happen until the United States. But it would have been served cold, and you would have had a tiny bit, but you would have had a plate of pickles. Suddenly, does it really seem that heavy? To me, it doesn't, right? But Michael Pollan said every food tradition has some wisdom to it, and there are pairings that make sense for a reason. And he actually said the only cuisine that doesn't make sense is Ashkenazi food, the cuisine of his own heritage. And I submit that he is wrong, and he is thinking about the Jewish deli, which is a very American institution. And it completely transformed this culture because of American affluence, access to cheap meat, access to a whole different set of ingredients. So the pickle really reveals a lot of that for me. And of course, this is our herb gefilte fish terrine from the book. And I remember reading through another book about sort of culinary wisdom and reading about sushi and wasabi, and then it clicked. I was like, oh, wait a second. Of horseradish and gefilte fish. And you start to do some research and you find that the Slavs used to eat meat with horseradish because it was sort of their insurance policy. What happens if the meat's not precious, and it actually, in fact, around Easter time, Poles, non-Jewish Poles, usually eat fish and horseradish. And the gefilte fish and the horseradish makes so much sense when you think about it, because often gefilte fish, fish would travel. If you weren't near a big lake or you weren't near access to water, you would have to, you would sort of have these fish that were staying in these big tubs. I'm sure many of you know, we were just talking about the fish in the part of the bathtub story from New York. And so you would have fish, you didn't really know where it came from, you didn't know if it was the freshest. Sometimes the fish wasn't alive when it got to you. And so the horseradish was that insurance policy. It was really intense. It has antimicrobial properties that kill off the bad bacteria. Same way, and wasabi does that same with the raw fish. And so it's built into the tradition. And so there's a wisdom throughout, and you can find it in so many different dishes throughout Ashkenazi cooking. And really, it's really beautiful to me to think about that wow, I always just assumed that I was destined as an Ashkenazi Jew to have irritable bowel syndrome and intestinal issues. And in fact, maybe we've just been eating things wrong for the past 100 years. There's also a seasonality to this all. Talking about pickles, in October, the shtetls apparently smelled like cabbage because everyone was shredding cabbage to make sauerkraut. That was how you would eat vegetables through the winter. Because after November, December, there was not a single fresh item coming from that ground. And if you were going to eat well throughout the year, you needed to preserve. One of my favorite stories that I learned during my research was the story of how people preserved pickles, of course back to pickles, through the winter. Come July, which was cucumber harvest season, you would pack a barrel full of salt and spices and cucumbers, and then people would take that barrel, in places like Lithuania this was common, you would take that barrel, bring it to a lake, go out in a boat, drop it into the lake, and in that lake it would stay at a steady temperature, and then as the lake froze over, it got a little cooler, and it stayed nice and crisp throughout the winter. Come Passover, when the lake thawed, you'd go retrieve that barrel of pickles, and you'd have perfectly crisp cucumbers for Passover. It's a lot of work, and there were also plenty of cucumbers that were making it into your home, but this was an insurance policy to make sure that during Passover you were going to be eating some kind of vegetable derived product, and something that was going to help you digest that matzah, all those heavy things that are really, really hard to take sometimes during the holiday.
We should have pickles on the Seder table.
I always had them growing up as a kid. My father, he didn't make them, but he took them out of a jar. But yes, probiotic foods during the holidays are necessary for digestion during Passover. And in fact, there's usually the beets that were being preserved. Beets would be, most families had root cellars. They put the beets in the root cellar, and then by the end, by March, around Passover time, really, those beets looked really bad in the root cellar if you didn't use them. And so you'd put them in salt water, and you'd make a beet russell, a fermented, basically beet brine, and then you'd use that russell to make borscht. And that was how you'd have a probiotic borscht for Passover, which was what you would commonly eat on Passover. So a lot of the decisions we were making, there's that wisdom, but it's also because of these seasonal choices that we're making. And so pickles were one of the ways of making sure you were going to eat well throughout the season. Making jams, I always heard my grandmother, who grew up in Poland, she always told the stories of her mother cooking down plums from the trees in their yard in copper kettles over fire, and they would go and go to those jams whenever they made their desserts, and that's how they got the fruit, the sweets, and it was from these short windows in the summertime. And when I was in Poland in the summer, I went and on the side of the road they sell wild blueberries, and everyone knows you buy these blueberries and you make your jam and you have it through the winter. And it was pretty amazing for me because I felt like that was really disconnected from my experience here in New Jersey. Like I didn't really grow up preserving my foods. I really connected it all to the seasons. This is a duck. It's actually we have a recipe for a goose or a duck in the book. Something that came out for me a lot throughout my research was how important goose was to Jewish cooking. In fact, Every single Jewish home would want goose for the holidays over duck. Chicken was one of the cheaper birds you could possibly get. Goose was really what was sought after for a few reasons. Anyone know why?
The down, so you can make bedding.
You can make bedding. Big one. The schmaltz. So the goose were covered in this really beautiful fat that is not very greasy like chicken fat, and it is quite flavorless, so it's very neutral. And butter would be sort of what was being eaten, spring, summer, into the fall, because the calves are usually birthed around March, April, around Passover time. You have dairy flowing, you're making butter, and going into the fall, as once it gets cold and the animals stop producing milk, you need a different fat source. This is before we had access to cheap oils. So schmaltz was the fat of the day for Jews, and goose fat was the most sought after. And this was really, when I learned about this tradition of the Hanukkah goose, that just like there's a Christmas goose. You guys heard of that, the Christmas goose?
Yes.
Yeah, like the classic. There's the Hanukkah goose, and in fact, you would slaughter a goose right around Hanukkah. You would render the fat, and you'd fry the latkes in the fat. And for those who don't, I realize I didn't define schmaltz. For those who don't know, it's just rendered poultry fat, or rendered fat, or fat in general. You can call schmaltz herring. It's just the fatty fish. So they'd render the fat, they'd fry latkes in that goose fat, but they'd actually serve a main dish, a goose. Hanukkah rolls around and I'm eating latkes and sufganiyot and gelt, and I have a stomach ache. And I always wondered, how does this holiday make any sense? Is this what people ate? But the first Sabbath, and if there were two Sabbaths actually during Hanukkah, if it fell on that time, they would slaughter a goose and serve it and have your latkes that were fried in it, which are so much better fried in goose fat, I promise you. Or even in chicken fat, it's a whole different experience. And that was sort of what was done. And of course, it was served with applesauce, because apples would be stored in your root cellar. So suddenly Hanukkah sort of opened up for me as a different kind of culinary holiday than what I knew it as. The latke fry became a little bit more sophisticated. But it is very hard to track down a goose now. And that's one of the sad realities, is that geese are, except for Christmas time, it's very hard to find a goose. And even during Christmas time, because geese don't take well to industrialized agriculture. Chickens take really well. They can just subsist only on corn. But geese rely on greens and pasture.
So you can come to Milburn Park. We got
Although those are usually protected by national and international law. I think,
we actually pay to have people chase them out of the park.
yeah, but I think those are usually Canadian geese, and I think they're protected by NAFTA or something. There's like some protection on them, so you can't actually slaughter those geese. I don't think you'd want to.
They're free range, aren't they?
True. I imagine there's a lot of pesticides in the grass that they're eating. But the point is, this is one of those seasonal traditions. And the other thing that when I went to Poland, I was there in the summer, and I realized, oh my gosh, it's not always winter here. It's not always heavy food time. And what do you know? You read through old Yiddish literature and old memoirs, and you find out that there was a tradition of picnicking. And of light foods that take well to the warm weather. So this is, we created for the cookbook our Dream Latvian Picnic. And there's pickled watermelon rinds, and there's pickled grapes, and fresh bread, and there's herring, and fresh fruit, and just basically there's salted butter to eat, and there's just some light refreshments, sort of like what Margie made, the rhubarb syrups. And wow, again, color. There's a lighter side to this tradition. And so I always love to tell people, no, add color. You don't need to shy away from garnish when you're cooking Jewish food. It's okay. Green brings it alive, but there's also warm months. It's only a couple of months of the year, but take advantage. And in fact, our ancestors did. There's also a resourcefulness at the heart of all of it. Anyone know what this is?
Yes.
It's not smoked fish.
Whitefish.
This is not a whitefish, but there is whitefish involved.
Salted.
It's not salted fish.
Sardine.
It's not a sardine.
Chavez, no?
No. What this is?
What's left?
This is gefilte fish. So gefilte in Yiddish
Stuffed.
means stuffed. So what gefilte fish used to be was stuffed fish. And in fact, fish was expensive, and it was really special to have fish and meat for the Sabbath. So what you would do is you would buy a fish, and you would take out the flesh, and you'd mix it up with breadcrumbs and egg and onions. The poorer you were, the more breadcrumbs would go in there, because you were stretching how far one fish could go to feed your family. You know, the root of most of these dishes, of most of this whole cuisine is, hey, we don't have a lot to work with, let's stretch it. That's one of my favorite things about it is the economical side of this tradition, but it meant that cooks had to be creative. Cooking oil was so expensive, schmaltz, butter, so when you were making something like a cholent, by slow cooking it, you brought out those flavors without having to use all that cooking oil, and it just took longer. There was a way of thinking about cooking and food that was very different than how we think about it today as Americans. Nothing went to waste. And one of the illustrative stories is, of course, we have, this is a picture of some deviled eggs. You have the cholent deviled eggs, which are actually eggs that slow cooked in the cholent. So if you're making a cholent and you have this stew that's going to go into the oven, it's going to be on a low temperature for 24 hours, why not cook other things in it? Put some eggs in it, let them get boiled, and then you'll have eggs also on the Sabbath. One of our ways of being playful is we actually make it into a deviled egg. We devil it. But another recipe is the one that has a white egg yolk is our chopped liver. And if you ever make chopped liver, you usually use egg yolk, hard-boiled egg yolk. And I remember making this chopped liver and saying, wait, what am I going to do with all these egg whites? This is ridiculous. And I realized if I sliced them in half, I can just put the chopped liver into the egg yolk so I can devil them. Nothing goes to waste. And for me, that felt very much like in the spirit of this tradition, making use of it. And I'll tell you this, for anyone who has young children or grandchildren, chopped liver is a hard sell. I remember when I was younger, it was sort of the litmus test for whether or not you could sit at the adult table was if at Passover was if you could eat the chopped liver. Young children respond well to things packaged like this. So my niece and nephews, 6 and 8, they eat chopped liver because it's served in this different kind of form. And I think that's actually really telling for a lot of these foods, a lot of Jewish food. If it's packaged and presented a little bit differently, people are more receptive to it. And for those who are curious, the little brown things on top of the chopped liver, that's ribness. That's the crispy fried chicken skins from making schmaltz. And that is its own specialty, the Jewish pork rind as it's known. But I like to think a bit more sophisticated. And right now, very popular in the food world. And this is our sour dill martini. But it was very important for me as a pickler to figure out what to do with all my pickle brine. And we were talking about you make this pickle brined chicken, no? No, you were talking about pickle brined chicken, which I love. So pickle brine is chock full of flavor. If you're making Jewish pickles, it's probiotic, it has great bacteria, and you can't let it go to waste. In fact, throughout Polish and Jewish and Russian history, no one was throwing this stuff out. They were making soups with pickle brine, they were making breads with pickle brine, they were making all sorts of different kinds of foods. In our cookbook, we make salad dressings with pickle brine. We make some cocktails. We make a pickle brine Bloody Mary, we make a sour dill martini. The idea being that this is a special flavor that you shouldn't just toss out. In fact, you should repurpose in all sorts of ways. And I think that's one of the things I love seeing of these pickle soups. And it seems kind of crazy, but it's really smart. You have garlic, and you have often onion, and you have your saltiness. And so if you know how to harness it, you know how to use it well. You can brine a chicken with it and then grill it. But you're grilling it. That's a really smart way of using those flavors, and that's a very Ashkenazi technique. I want to give you some credit for that. And lastly, there's a community side to all of this. And so this is a picture of my cholent. This is a sort of Hungarian cholent, so it has a lot of paprika, some spice to it. One of the things in composing this photo, it was important for me to find an old cholent pot. So So cholent was traditionally, especially in the smaller towns in Eastern Europe, would be all the ingredients would be assembled in a pot, usually a clay vessel, and brought over to a public oven or sometimes to a baker's oven. And before the Sabbath, the baker would basically stop adding logs to the fire, but usually leave the embers there, the dying embers, for cholent to cook. And community members would come and bring the cholent to the oven. And on Saturday before lunch, they'd usually send children to go and pick up the finished pot of cholent. And they were all labeled in the oven, and they'd come home and they'd have a hot meal for the day. But there's a way of the community coming together around this, which I really think is sort of missing in some of our food traditions and food culture. It's become very family in the States. You go to your own family's home, but there's not the sharing as used to sort of happen. I also love that a lot of family members, a lot of kids messed up, and so people got different cholent pots for the Sabbath. Yeah, and of course, kids are carrying these hot things, but they would come home and sometimes they have someone else's cholent. It was kind of exciting. What did they put in there? Was there barley? Was there rice? Was there potatoes? What kind of beans were they? We were talking about the different cholent variations earlier. There's all sorts of different things that we put into this dish, and different approaches and perspectives, and everyone got to taste someone else's cholent. Usually, not just when they went to someone else's house. This is a picture of a marble rye challah from the book, but in one of my favorite anecdotes was in a memoir of an educator in Lithuania in the 1930s named Hirsch Abramovich, a book called Profiles of a Lost World, and he wrote really beautifully about if a family couldn't afford challah for the Sabbath, that everyone in the community chipped in. And they made sure, because wheat was really expensive, rye was really cheap, rye was available, rye was the bread you had every day, and wheat was something wheat flour you got just for the special occasion. And you'd make a challah if you could, but if you couldn't, then the community would step in and either bake challah or provide that wheat flour for the family member that couldn't do it. And I think Shabbat is one of the ways that I feel like the Jewish community keeps on that tradition, even in schools. I know that my niece comes home with challah, on a weekly basis, and I know that in New York right now it's very popular you can send challah-grams to people. Has that caught on in New Jersey? So it's actually pretty cool. You can send different sizes. You can do giant challahs and challahs in different shapes, and you can send a challah to someone before the holidays. But there's a way of this sort of fundamentally Jewish food can make sure we keep people in the community, and I take a lot of inspiration from sort of the way that we orient ourselves around these food traditions. And this is a picture of a deli spread that I made, and every single thing on this deli spread was made from scratch, but was also, to me, in some ways connected to those. I started to look differently at these foods, at the deli experience. It's the secular synagogue, this sort of community coming together. I rarely go into a deli by myself. I go with friends, I go with family. I'm eating meats, that's a pastrami and a corned beef in the middle that were home cured, and the pastrami was smoked, but these are meats that were preserved to last longer, to make it, for at least, the cure usually is at least 2 weeks long. These cured meats will stay for up to a month. Of course, there are pickles, again, more of these preserved foods. This is a summer deli meal, so we have there's a cucumber and dill soda that were in the corner there. There's some homemade mustard. We have our root vegetable latkes, which sort of reflects some of the summer roots that were available, some of the early parsnips and the radishes, and also some of the new potatoes that were available. And so that was really exciting. In the top, this knishes, roasted garlic knish with sort of the uncured garlic that was fresh out of the ground in the summertime. This was a spread that we made in the Berkshires on a farm. Bottom left, applesauce with, those were, I believe, summer apples we got from the market. And so the summer apples aren't as sweet, but they take well to making sauce. Right next to the applesauce are the gribenes, which are some of the fried chicken skins. We were rendering schmaltz, so we had the chicken skins, and we brought those in for texture. The kasha varnishkas I wouldn't necessarily call a summer food, but we said, hey, we got Brussels sprouts, let's add some green, let's lighten this thing up a little bit. And And the whole thing is an attempt to try to make this deli spread feel more relevant again, and to understand it using that frame of understanding the community, the seasonality, the wisdom that's inherent there. The pickles are going to help us digest this all. And again, I mean, these recipes all come from a place of resourcefulness. And one of my favorite things to do is after I make kasha varnishkas, which are the kasha and gotai noodles for those who maybe haven't had this before. Whenever you have extra kasha varnishkas, I like to wrap them in a knish afterwards. I like to think of the knish on the top there. The knish dough is sort of Jewish Tupperware. You know, this is what families would do. Seriously, if you had potatoes left over, you had chopped liver, you'd wrap it up in knish dough, bake it, and then you'd send off, whoever was going to work that day. That was how you had. Those were your calories for the day, and you, of course, you would eat it with mustard. Don't be crazy. You can't have a knish without mustard, but that knish was a vehicle for leftovers. And leftovers are, this meal can be turned into hundreds of different meals. You can take that pastrami and shred it and put that pastrami into a knish. You can, the applesauce, leftover applesauce, we can make an applesauce cake like you made, like Margie made. So there's really for me, I kind of see, I started to look differently at these foods and at the deli, and I started to appreciate it on a whole new level.
Is that sauerkraut?
In the middle is actually a coleslaw. That's just like a typical basic coleslaw, carrots and cabbage, and nothing too exciting. Just gonna wrap up and just offer a few closing thoughts. These 4 photos here are photos of different restaurants that have opened across the country, of young people my age who, in the years since I started the Gifilteria and started this work, people who also kind of got that call and started their businesses. On the top left is the Mile End Deli, which is a Montreal-style Jewish deli in New York, which a Montrealer moved to New York, went to law school, dropped out, and started smoking weed. And it became a really hip place in Brooklyn. They opened up another shop in Montreal. It's in Brooklyn. They opened another shop in Manhattan. And now they opened up a bagel shop making Montreal-style bagels in New York, which again is just crazy, but they're very delicious. The top right is Cantor's, which is a new deli in Los Angeles, and they have a few locations. You walk in there, it's completely one of the hippest places. White tile. It's pretty amazing. The bottom left is Beauty's Bagel Shop, which is a new bagel shop in Oakland, California. I was there. I was just on a book tour, so I was going around the country and traveling. Everywhere I went, I stopped and visited the places. And there was a line out the door when I was there. It was a Sunday morning, but people were lining up in San Francisco, or in the Bay Area, it's generally known that no bagel can ever live up to people's memories because there's so many New York Jews who moved to the Bay Area. But this place apparently stacks up well. And bottom right is in Philadelphia, Eston Bakery. There's an Australian Jewish woman who moved to Philadelphia, and she was working in restaurants, and she decided that she got the call to make babka and other Jewish baked goods, and she opened this bakery. And this year she was nominated for a James Beard Award for being one of the top bakers in the country. And this is just a few. I was in Charleston, South Carolina, and I met, which is an exploding restaurant scene, and I was making pickles there, and this couple came up to the pickle workshop, and they told me they were going to open up a Jewish deli. Another person came and said they were going to open a bagel shop, and another person said that they were going to start a smoked fish company. And so I said, you guys should all talk, But then in Miami, there's a baker who opened a kosher deli. He has an incredible bakery in one of the hippest neighborhoods in Miami, and he opened up a deli across the street. And it's a kosher deli, but he's making everything from scratch, doing it the old-fashioned way. And throughout the country, in Canada as well, you're seeing this. There's sort of my generation sort of heeded that call that we need to make sure this food tradition lives on. And these are 2 photos from this program I teach at Brandeis in the summer. And it's these 2 photos are from a class I teach at Brandeis in the summer.
Yeah, we have a daughter there.
Oh, it's a summer class for pre-college students, so usually about 11th to 12th graders, high schoolers. But
Do you go? Is that through Haley House? Is that Haley House?
it's not, no. But Brandeis has a rooftop farm, and they have a kitchen and a classroom. And so I get to go there and work with young Jewish students, and usually high schoolers who most of them have never heard of borscht, they've never heard of most Jewish foods, and get to teach them the history of these foods, but also how to cook them. And we get to go and start on the farm and harvest the foods. But one of the things that's really exciting is that a lot of these kids come because of the Food Network, because of the role that cooking and just, I guess, food media plays in our lives. These kids come and they're just hungry for these stories. They want to feel connection. And the students on the bottom left making their own noodles, their own lakshin, to make lakshin pickle from scratch. And every Friday they're making challah, and Jewish life sort of comes alive for these students. And we make sure that they're cooking for their friends, for all the other people in the program. They're making mandel bread and rugelach, and many of them who never even heard of these foods were suddenly going back home and saying, I want to learn more about them. And so it's really exciting for me to think about what that next generation, how they're going to take these food traditions. And I think we're kind of at this moment now where we're sort of correcting for mid-century industrialization of our food system. And I think this next generation, and I'm already speaking as someone who, I'm double their age, I really think that there's a lot of potential there. And it's become one of the most important things that I do, is every summer going and working with this next generation. And that's that. But we have time for questions.
We were talking before. I was supposed to tell you, ask you when you talk about the Israeli food as Jewish.
Yes. So, but your question was earlier. Oh, you were telling me all these young people, they think Jewish food is just Israeli food. Yeah. And so I have a term for that. And I call it the falafelization of Jewish culture. and it's a ridiculous term, but it's a really serious idea. And it's this, to me, it's really, I remember when, I called it that because I remember when Deli Day at Schechter was replaced by Falafel Day. We used to order it in from the different places around. I think Jerusalem Pizza supplied the falafel, and I don't remember where the deli came from. But I remember when that happened, and I think we're seeing it's not just with food; it's culture too. You know, Yiddish culture, klezmer music, all of these things sort of have been pushed aside. And my generation, I went to a Hebrew day school, learned Hebrew, didn't really learn much about Eastern European history besides the pogroms and anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. And those were the things that we learned about. I got the Yiddishkeit from home, but not everyone did. All my grandparents were born in Poland, though, and I'm a grandchild of survivors. So for me, it was also a little more immediate, a little closer. But I see a lot of young people, and they've taken on this identity and this connection to Israel and Israeli food and all of these things, which, listen, I love Israeli food. I used to import Israeli olive oil. I've lived in Israel. But I also feel like that's not, New York culture, the Borscht Belt. I mean, those kids at Brandeis that I work with, I remember trying to talk to them about Dirty Dancing, the movie, and saying, oh yeah, that takes place in the Catskills, the Borscht Belt. And they were all like, it's a Jewish movie? Like, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, what happened? They don't know about the fact that that's where comedy developed. That's the New York history. I remember having this moment when I lived in Tel Aviv, and I was watching the funniest shows on television, and I felt a moment when I realized, oh, I'm an American Jew. I'm a New York Jew. Like, I'm a Woody Allen, Jerry Seinfeld Jew. I grew up differently, but it works with food too. And I'm seeing this a lot. Like, there's sort of a conflation of Jewish food is everything. It's Gifilteria and falafel and Israeli salad and couscous, and I think there's a rich, a beautiful idea there, and that oh yeah, well, it's what Jews eat around the world, and we get to bring all that in. But I also look at a lot of Jewish cookbooks that just have every single ingredient under the sun, and I realize, I don't think this makes a gastronomic sense, And I actually love the idea of there being a really strong and rich Moroccan culinary tradition, Moroccan Jewish tradition, an Ashkenazi tradition, an Israeli one, and I find it to be troubling. But what I'll say and answer is, right now there's a resurgence of interest in Yiddish and in Eastern European heritage. It's really cool to learn Yiddish right now in an alternative kind of way. There's a klezmer and Yiddish festival in Montreal, or just outside of Montreal in the mountains, every year called Klez Kenta. And the young kids that are coming are punks. Many of them aren't even Jewish. They have hair that's all different colors, all sorts of piercings, and because the mainstream Jewish community has rejected this culture, and a lot of them have decided that they are now interested in it. In Tel Aviv, there's an alternative Yiddish scene as well. And I was just in Berlin. I was talking earlier with Margie about this. I was there for the first ever Jewish food festival in Germany. And they threw a gefilte ball. And there was a gefilte fish talk, and I was talking with the state comic at the beginning. But then there was a klezmer concert, and it was an amazing, and there was Yiddish folk dancing. And in Germany right now, that's really exciting for people. Like a lot of them are young Americans or young Canadians that are now living in Berlin. But for them, they're there. They're like, wait, we want to know what Jewish life was like before we got here, and before our grandparents had to go, over to the United States, and there's that discovery that's happening. So I think that it's an interesting moment we're in. But the colonialization, it's really taken a toll on Jewish people.
Anyone else? Thank you so much.
great.
This is great.
I have some books with me. I'm happy to sign anyone's book. And I'm sticking around, so make sure you guys eat some food. And Margie made some dessert, and you made the applesauce cake, I believe.
Yeah.
And there's more refreshments. So thank you guys.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.